Today on Interview 360, a reminder of the cultural ties between the U.S. and China and how music, specifically the Philadelphia Orchestra, helped establish the U.S.-China relationship. The orchestra's 1973 performance in Beijing was a first for an American orchestra, and now, some 46 years after that, the Philadelphia organization is touring China again. Performances that include 4 musicians who were there in 1973. There is a lot to talk about, and Ryan Fleur is here to fill us in. Ryan, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Craig. Thank you for having me.
So much to talk about. Okay, so the Philadelphia Orchestra, you have a long history in China, but this tour coming up has a lot of milestones, and this is really important. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. You know, we know that in our work with China, anniversaries always ring special as to signify things, but it is, you know, it's 40 years since normalized relations between the U.S. and China, which started in 1979. And we're traveling, the Philadelphia Orchestra is traveling to China in May of 2019 to celebrate those 40 years. And we're giving official performances in Beijing and Shanghai to mark those occasions. It's an important milestone for us, but not even so much the Philadelphia Orchestra. This is an important milestone for the Chinese government and the U.S. government. And in today's uncertain times, one of the things that it's absolutely important and critical that music, which can bring people together, no matter how it's played, be used in such an important forum as U.S.-China relations today.
It can't be over-exaggerated. The orchestra really did help cement the ties between the U.S. and China that allowed it to become official, normalized relations.
It's a reminder that despite the structures we have in the world, music is a uniting force. And that notion of cultural exchange and cultural diplomacy, which is central to the Philadelphia Orchestra's mission, is more important now than ever in the world.
So you were the first cultural ambassadors.
We were. You know, it was 25 years where there was almost no contact between the U.S. and China. And after Chairman Mao and President Nixon met in 1972, immediately following that, there was an agreement that there would be cultural exchange. There were ping pong players that came over to the U.S.
Right.
and
ping pong diplomacy.
we sent the swimming team over, but they wanted something big and bold and cultural, and that's when the Philadelphia Orchestra got invited to join.
President Nixon actually requested the Philadelphia Orchestra go on this trip and do this performance, correct?
Yes, it did. In fact, you know, President Nixon, he recorded every conversation he ever had. But we found but we found the tape of when he called our conductor at the time, Maestro Ormandy,
Eugene Ormandy, right?
Eugene Ormandy, right? And he when he invited him to come over, and it's really quite powerful for those of us that are living it every day to hear President Nixon calling the Philadelphia Orchestra and saying, "Would you please come to China and help us, you know, normalize relations?"
That's funny. I never thought about that recording. That specific recording existed. So President Nixon requested that. And this is a first for an American orchestra to perform in Beijing at the Great Hall, right?
That was it. It was the Great Hall of the People. Right. So it was, we gave, at that time, back in 1973, I think we were there for 10 days, and we gave 3 concerts in Beijing and 2 in Shanghai, and did an awful lot of people-to-people exchange. So we worked with the Central Philharmonic, where our musicians worked with them. We brought them gifts of instruments. They gave us gifts of instruments. You know, Eugene Ormandy conducted their orchestra. The country stopped. I mean, the rice fields were lined with speakers, and there was an announcement that you're now going to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra play. It was, for those of us who know, U.S. history, the impact that the moon landing had in U.S. history in 1969 was very comparable to when the Philadelphia Orchestra performed in China in 1973. In fact, the composer Tan Dun, he's a well-known, he's born in China, he's a Chinese composer. He won an Oscar for doing the score to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon maybe 20 years ago.
Right.
But he's one of the more prominent Chinese composers today. He tells an amazing story about He was in the rice fields in 1973. And he was maybe, I don't know, 20 years old. And he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And he was working in the fields. And over the speakers said, okay, stop what you're doing. Now you're going to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra. And he talks about this experience of hearing the Philadelphia Orchestra play Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, which he had never heard. He had never, the sound. And he decided at that moment, he said, I'm going to write music that sounds like that. That's what I'm going to do with my life.
Now that's the impact of music. And we're talking about a time when Western classical music is not as well known in China. So this was also another first, right? The introduction of live Western classical music.
That's correct. We performed Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and it was a late request that Madame Mao had made of us. And we agreed to the request, but we didn't have the music. And so they
agreed reluctantly, if I recall correctly.
That is good.
Okay.
We did agree reluctantly. So.
Because that's Eugene Normandy, Maestro Normandy.
Yes, and he
didn't care for this Beethoven
He
Sixth.
did not. It was the piece he liked least in the repertoire. And he said, I'll conduct the Fifth Symphony, I'll conduct the Seventh Symphony, but don't make me conduct the Sixth Symphony.
That is an infamous story. It's more than a famous story. It's kind of an infamous story because Eugene Normandy, the maestro, is kind of a man of small stature but large energy, right?
That's right.
And so when he says he doesn't like a piece, that reverberates. But
what the maestro said went for the Philadelphia Orchestra. And if he didn't want to play something, we didn't play something.
But the request came from the highest levels of the Chinese government in
That's
1973.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of back and forth. That actually took place. It's an infamous story. And the performance was flawless, of course, with the orchestra. And now, 46 years later, you guys are reprising the Sixth Symphony.
Yeah,
I'm assuming this is going to be part of the concert.
So actually, we go back, as you may know, the Philadelphia Orchestra has, since that first trip in 1973, we've gone back, I think, about a dozen times since then. And for all the times that we've come back, we've never played Beethoven's Sixth Symphony since that first trip. So on this visit upcoming in May, we'll be performing Beethoven's Sixth Symphony.
There are 4 members of the orchestra going on this tour that were there. They were there in 1973.
That's right.
We have pictures of Booker and Renard and Michael and David. They're fascinating to look at. It's really a walk down memory lane.
If you talk to them, they will tell you that was a truly transformational experience.
Booker Rowe,
Mm-hmm.
the violin.
Second violin, that's
Second
right.
violin. Also part of the Nashville Symphony. He's played in the Nashville
He
Symphony
played in
where
the
I
Nashville
grew
Symphony
up. Right.
which is very cool. He was in the Nashville Symphony before he joined us. Renard had joined right around that time, and he plays viola in the orchestra.
You mentioned Michael Shahan, is that
Michael
correct?
Shahan. Michael
Shahan.
Yeah, yes. And Mike, he's the bass player, and I was at his home a couple of years ago, and I walk in, and there was this striking print on the wall. And it was very clearly Chinese art. And I went and I asked him. He said, "Oh yeah, well, in 1973, our first day off, I went to this market and I saw this and I said I needed to buy this." And so he's carrying that memory of 1973 with him. David's a real special person. David is, not only does he play in our second violin section, he also plays piano in the orchestra. So he's always on stage.
I think that's him in the piano.
He's playing piano in
yeah,
this
okay.
particular picture. Yeah, that's right. He's also very famous for the 200 tattoos he has.
You're serious?
Serious, okay. all around his, every inch. So he's a fascinating person.
Little known fact. It's amazing that you have musicians with such a long history with your organization. That's rich.
Our history is very important, but our history is nothing unless it informs the future. And that's what we're most excited about in our work in China. We have a musician who was not with us in 1973. His name is Phil Cates, and he's in our violin section as well. And the first thing he does was as soon as we land in China and we get to our hotel in Beijing, he takes his violin and there's a hospital across the street. And he just walks into the hospital, and he goes into the children's ward, and he just starts playing for the children. It's a very powerful experience if someone's standing as far as I am from you and playing their instrument, and they're one of the better players in the world.
Right.
Yeah, so it's truly it's a very, you can see in their eyes. You don't need, it doesn't matter about a language barrier. You make there's a soulful connection that takes place.
You don't like your job, do you? That's fantastic. What is the most fun about what you guys do?
What I'm so impressed with this orchestra is that when we travel someplace, since we've had such a long history, inevitably we've been there before, and we have touched so many lives around the world, and those people come up to us and talk to us and share those experiences. None more so than when we're in China.
They must be emotionally attached to
It
this
is,
trip.
you know, it's each time we go back, we usually stage some sort of reunion where we'll bring the original members of that orchestra that are still playing with our orchestra, and they'll have tea, and they'll say, and I've sat in the room when it happens, and you're kind of like a fly on the wall, but this energy that you feel, and you see people revisiting this moment of history, and it's very emotional for those musicians. We perform audiences in China wherever, whether it's Beijing, Shanghai, Changsha, Shenzhen. It's a young audience. It's people in their 30s and 40s, and they're bringing their young kids. And this is when we're playing some pretty heady repertoire. We're playing Mahler symphonies, and the kids are attentive. And it's one of the, it fuels this energy of us wanting to go back and share what we do, you know, at such a high level. It's truly an amazing experience.
So the tour will mark 46 years since the first performance in
That's
1973,
correct.
and 40 years of normalized relations between the U.S. and China. So you're marking two very big anniversaries.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And we're really focusing on that 40th anniversary because we've been having conversations with the Cultural Ministry in Beijing, as well as with the U.S. government. There'll be some activities that we're doing on the ground that's pay tribute to that.
So there's symbolism in where you guys perform, and where are some of the places? You'll be revisiting some of the places that you performed
Sure.
in
So
1973.
we will be at the in Beijing at the National Center for the Performing Arts, which is this is a huge facility that opened right around the Olympics in 2008,
Okay.
right? So we'll be giving two concerts there, and then we'll be finishing up with a concert in Shanghai at the Oriental Arts Center. But we're giving a major performance in Beijing and on the campus of the China Music Conservatory. Now, the China Music there are two big conservatories in Beijing, the Central Conservatory and the China Music Conservatory. We've partnered with both, but in 1973 we partnered with the China Music Conservatory. And this year we're renewing that partnership. We will also be playing in Tianjin, in Hangzhou, and in Nanjing. Nanjing will be new for us. We've played in the other cities before. So we're very proud that we're going to these cities. You know, Hangzhou, which is the city by the lake, which is one of the most beautiful places you could be. Tianjin, which is sister city to Philadelphia. So we have that connection. So we're pleased to be broaching the Great Wall on both ends of the wall.
Any pop-up concerts along the way?
Yes, but if I told you where they were, then there wouldn't be pop-up concerts. Right?
So more to come then?
More to come, yes.
Okay, all right, very good. Ryan, it's good to talk to you.
Thank you, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here on the show.
A lot of history being talked about, a lot of history still being made. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Glad you could be here. We'll see you back here next time. This is Interview 360.